All right, joining me now, he is the lead draft analyst here at PFF and soon to be host of his very own podcast. It is Mike Renner. Mike, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on, Ari, again.
No, absolutely. Really looking forward to this. First of all, because we've gotten to see a lot of rookies here in the first week of preseason, but as also, like I mentioned, you have your very own podcast here coming up at PFF. Before I jump into the episode, obviously, we all like 2-for-1 drafts and tailgate with Austin Gale, but he's moved on to the Ringer. We're happy for him. But this is some big time news here for you. Any, I guess, teasers, details, what we're about to have here with your own solo podcast?
Yeah, so to replace Austin, no one man could replace him. So every show we'll have a new guest. It'll be, kind of half me, half a guest interview where we talk about, anything goes basically. I've already had some great conversations with Kevin O'Connell, the new Vikings head coach, Tanner McKee, one of the top quarterback prospects, Stanford quarterback, Bruce Feldman of the Fox Sports, whose Freaks List just came out. So going to see a lot of those interviews coming up in the next few weeks. So it's been a lot of fun kind of starting this up and see where it goes.
Well, that sounds pretty awesome. Kevin O'Connell is a big time guest. Bruce Feldman is I actually got to read his Freaks List every year. One of the best things to read every time around this year. Let me ask you this. I mean, how often are we planning to have this come out? Every week? What's the plan here? When is the official launch episode?
So official launch date is next Thursday. I believe that is the 25th, August 25th. That episode, and then you'll see every Monday, Thursday throughout the season, throughout, however long they let me do this podcast at PFF before they fire me.
I don't think that's ever going to happen anytime soon, but that sounds awesome. I got to ask you, I mean, I know you've done this podcast with Austin for so long. Are you going to be able to replace that energy that is missing now that he's no longer there?
I don't know what I'm going to have to do. Maybe smelling salts, drugs, something before the show to replace that, because there is no replacing it. He's a special dude. Sad to see him, leave PFF, but he's going to do big things at the Ringer. So excited for him that opportunity.
Absolutely. All right. So official launch date is next Thursday. We're all very much looking forward to it. I didn't even ask this. What is the name of the podcast?
It is Talkin' Ball with Mike Renner. It is the name of the podcast. And so it's a little it sounds kind of football guy-y, but we really keep it light, and it's a good time each show.
All right, we're all looking forward to that. Talkin' Ball with Mike Renner officially launching next Thursday. So that will be very exciting here for everyone here at PFF, and hopefully for everyone else who will be tuning in wherever you get your podcast. What I wanted to do here today, Mike, we're into the preseason, one game in. We've had OTAs, we've had some camp. I want to talk about some of these rookies. Let's check in with some of them, and we've heard a lot of hype about a number of them, and I'm going to start with some pass catchers, and I want to start in Green Bay because Aaron Rodgers was speaking to reporters, I believe it was on Tuesday, and he was a bit critical of his wide receiving group. We actually have the video clip here. Let's play here what he had to say to reporters about his receiving group.
Unfortunately, some of the same guys. That's repeat mistakes are a problem. So we just got to clean those things up a little bit. The young guys, they got to, especially young receivers, we got to be way more consistent. A lot of drops, a lot of bad route decisions, run the wrong route. So we gotta get better in that area. He just won't be out there. Keep dropping the ball, you're not gonna be out there. So it's gonna be the most reliable guys that are out there. The preparation and the job responsibility is most important. There's gonna be physical mistakes that we talked about, but if you're going out there and dropping the ball and somebody else behind you is in the right spot all the time and catching the ball, that guy's going to play.
All right, a pretty straightforward explanation by Aaron Rodgers about what's going on with his receiving group. Romeo Doubs, their fourth-round pick out of Nevada, has been the one guy getting a lot of hype. We haven't really heard much about Christian Watson, who was their second-round pick. I guess, how much are you buying the Doubs hype, and how do you feel like the transition will be for Aaron now that he's without Davante Adams or without MVS this season?
Yeah, first off, I think that quote has got a little overblown. Obviously, if a guy's dropping the ball, he's not going to see the football field. Any quarterback in the NFL would say the same thing. You want guys out there that are reliable. But I do think this was the worry, right, when they traded away Davante Adams and relied on youth. It's not only that, maybe you're going to have inconsistent hands adjusting to the speed from whoever your quarterback was in college to Aaron Rodgers howitzer and how fast that ball is coming at you. But it's that you're learning a whole new playbook. Like he said, being in the right spot, doing the little things, that's just hard for any rookie to do. So this was kind of always the worry. Dobbs, though, I mean, what he showed in that preseason game, maybe he's one of the offenders in terms of drops and not being in the right spot. But the talent that he put on tape is undeniable. Like the fact that he flashes and has all these, training camp highlights that come out, I don't think is fake. I don't think what he put on tape against San Francisco is just can be done by any run-of-the-mill fourth-round receiver. I think it's real that he is going to be a difference maker at some point in Green Bay because of his ability to stack defenders on the football field. You can't run by cornerbacks. And he was running by the guy, Ambry Thomas, in that 49ers game that was starting against the Packers last year in the playoffs that other guys not named Devontae Adams couldn't beat on that Green Bay roster. He stacked him for what should have been a pass interference, ended up being a defensive legal contact penalty, but like he was running good routes in that game. So yeah, I'm excited about him. Christian Watson, though, is the one you worry about being behind the eight ball with the injury early on in camp. And he's one of, when they drafted him, why I was so critical of the pick goes back to what Aaron Rodgers was saying there. He had the highest drop rate of any wide receiver drafted on day one or day two over the course of his collegiate career at North Dakota State. So he might have a difficult time now seeing the football field early on.
Yeah, one of the other things that Aaron did mention, it wasn't played there in the video, is that he could see a scenario where both his running backs will be on the field a lot this year, and they could both be getting 50-plus receptions, that being Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, because they want to put their best 11 players on the field, and if the receivers are not playing out there the way he wants it to, they don't mind just using the running backs in the pass-catching game. I know it's not really a rookie question, but do you feel like the Packers should be looking to add one more veteran receiver to this group right now?
Well, yeah, they added what, Travis Fulgham, to the mix. That's not moving the needle. At this point in time, Will Fuller, Odell Beckham, like those are probably your only options that could actually make an impact. I would love to see them make that play, for the investment that it's going to cost them in terms of how much they'd have to pay those guys. Minimal compared to the impact they could make on this roster. So as obviously a Packers fan myself, I would love to see them make that play, but I just don't see it happening in Green Bay, especially with Aaron Rodgers and rapport and how long that takes to build with him. I think they're just going to rely on guys like Randall Cobb, Sammy Watkins, Allen Lazard. That's going to be your three deep, and the young guys might just have to sit a while to get their chance.
The Odell situation is the one that's most interesting to me because last year they were the other finalist when he was a free agent, and it's interesting because he has recovered from that torn ACL, and I've been saying this on this show and on PFF at night, but if he does not sign before the end of camp and lets the season start and let's just see how all these teams do, which teams really need me, it makes me wonder if he looks at the Green Bay situation come week 4, 5, 6 and is like, you know what? I would fit right in there. I would be able to play with Aaron Rodgers and be with a contending team because really the Rams really don't necessarily need him right now. We'll see once the season starts how things go. But if he does take that route, I think we'll definitely be keeping an eye on to see which teams emerge as needing a wide receiver and where would be the best destination for him. We talked about Romeo Doubs. We'll talk about another fourth-round pick here in Isaiah Likely, the Ravens tight end. This is someone who the Ravens have been raving about from OTAs and throughout camp. He comes in the first preseason game, catches all 4 of his targets, has 44 yards. He's breaking some ankles, catching passes in traffic. With the way the Ravens use their tight ends, it feels like Likely will be bound for a pretty big year alongside Mark Andrews. Am I reading this correctly?
I think you are. And this was way back when he got drafted. I was saying, wow, that was the fit. That offense was where Likely needed to go because he's 235 pounds. A 235-pound tight end for the vast majority of schemes in the NFL that put their tight ends right outside the offensive tackle, ask him to fire off to a defensive end in the run game. He's going to get killed. And he's not going to be an impact guy on your roster, and it's going to be liability in the run game. But you think the Ravens, maybe you just like conceptually think, oh, they run the ball a lot. Why isn't he going to get killed there? It's because they use their tight ends as pullers. Their tight ends are on the move. And so when he's on the move, he can block. That's what he did at Coastal Carolina. He can engage a linebacker. He can engage a safety. He can engage a cornerback. He's just not a guy you want going head up on a defensive end. So in that scheme, they're not going to ask him to. So I don't think him being 235 pounds is that big a liability. And then what we saw from him in that first preseason game, the 4 catches, the 3 broken tackles after the catch, like he moves better than any tight end too in the NFL right now. Like that was what he always could do. That's why he put up so many yards at Coastal Carolina, because he moves like a wide receiver and is kind of wide receiver size. But I do think for that Ravens offense, it's really not going to matter. He is going to flourish and obviously be a favorite of Lamar Jackson, because that's a position he likes to target, the middle of the field. That's where he likes to target. That's where likely can win.
One of the things that I like to see whenever there are these press conferences, a lot of it is just regular coach talk, player talk. You really don't get much out of it. But I've seen a lot of these Ravens coaches and players bring up Isaiah Likely on their own, which always tells me, okay, this guy is legit. If you're not being asked about him and you're talking about him, I think Lamar Jackson called him a baby Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews basically said, I see some of myself in him. John Harbaugh said that they intend to use him a lot this year. And then Tony Jefferson, who's a reserve safety around that team, went out of his way to basically tell reporters this guy's going to be the real deal. When you have all of that coming out of camp, it tells me that they're seeing a lot out of him during camp, during OTAs, and we've seen a lot of him through that one preseason game. And like you said, it just makes so much sense to see him there in Baltimore, of the way they run things. Really excited to see how he does moving forward. Possibly another slam dunk pick there for GM Eric DeCosta. Sticking in the AFC North, George Pickens. I mean, this feels like a slam dunk as well. I know there were some injury and maturity concerns, and that's probably why he dropped to round number 2. But Steelers GM Kevin Goldberg, who just stepped down, has a pretty long history of finding receivers outside round 1. And it looks like he's done it again here with George Pickens. I mean, what are we expecting out of him in year 1?
Yeah, I really couldn't believe he fell to where he did. I mean, he was a guy who was 26th on the PFF draft board because of the tape. Like, he was that good on tape. Like, what he's showing right now was who he was at Georgia. And it was against, in the SEC, when you're going up against the corners that you're facing, you can feel pretty strongly that that guy's going to translate to the NFL. And now that was way back as a sophomore and freshman at Georgia. And he tore his ACL last offseason before their championship run and didn't really play much down the stretch when he did get back healthy, and still was obviously hampering from that ACL injury. But now he's obviously over a year and a half removed from that and looks back to full strength. And it's that strength, the play strength, that separated him. It separated him as a freshman at Georgia. When a guy, very reminiscent of Jamar Chase, when a guy is the younger guy in college football, when he's going up against 22, 23-year-olds at 19, 18, and he's the one manhandling, that makes you feel good about that guy going to the NFL and still doing the manhandling, which is exactly what we're seeing from George Pickens. So, yeah, I'd say pump the brakes on the this year hype, rookie wide receivers. And again, with the quarterback situation there in Pittsburgh, they may not be too many yards and touchdowns to be had. I'd pump the brakes on the hype this year, but he looks like he very much belongs, and it's only a matter of time before he turns into, the next in a long line of Steeler wide receivers.
Yeah, I was looking through the list of the receivers that Kevin Colbert drafted throughout over these years outside round 1. You have Chase Claypool in 2020, second round. Deontay Johnson, third round, 2019. Juju was second round, 2017. Emmanuel Sanders was a third round pick. Antonio Brown was a sixth round pick. Mike Wallace was a third round pick. You could throw in Martavis Bryant, who was a fourth round pick as well. That's a pretty long list of some pretty decent wide receivers who have turned out to do some great things there in Pittsburgh. It feels like George Pickens could definitely join that list. They also have Calvin Austin, a fourth round pick who was drafted this year out of Memphis, a speedy guy. I know he's been dealing with some injuries, but I know they're also very excited about him. You mentioned the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh. Steelers fans were going a bit nuts with Kenny Pickett in his first preseason game. I think it's important to remember it happened against third and fourth stringers for the most part, but history does tell us that first round quarterbacks find their way onto the field in their rookie year. When do you think, if at all, we'll see Kenny this year?
Ooh, that's a good question. Honestly, I think it's going to be late in the year. I do think they're going to run with Trubisky. I do think they are good enough, they are good enough to compete for a playoff spot. I don't think they make the playoffs just because of happenstance of the AFC being so loaded. There's only so many mouths to feed. They're in one of the toughest, probably the second toughest division in the NFL. It's just like, it's going to be difficult, but it's still a very talented roster. And so they're going to fight till the end to make the playoffs with that roster. And then to me, once they're kind of out of it, then that's when we ended up seeing Kenny Pickett, because I did not think, the first performance was impressive in terms of comeback, the poise, leading a game-winning drive. But it wasn't impressive enough to be like, yeah, he's your guy. His average completion was 3.3 yards down the football field. It was dinking and dunking to the max. That works against third string as a preseason game. you're not going to get by moving the football that way against, your own division, the Baltimore Ravens. It's just not possible. So I do think it'll take his learning curve like every other rookie quarterback, and kind of what we said about this class, these guys really aren't ready. That's why they all fell. So I do think that it will be a while before we ever see Kenny Pickett as QB1.
I think this was mentioned on the broadcast. I wanted to ask you this. Have you ever heard of a quarterback who struggles possibly in practice, but then when it comes to being in the game and the lights are under him, he's able to perform better? Have you ever heard of that? Because they mentioned that about Kenny Pickett.
I have not. Like, I don't think that's a sustainable model. I'll just say, I think you can do it. I believe in guys showing up when the lights come on, like being unfazed by pressure and that sort of thing. But I don't think I've ever heard of a guy who literally looked average at best in practice and then showed up in games and was a difference maker. So I don't, like I said, don't think that's sustainable.
Right. I mean, it was brought up in the broadcast as something that this is what they saw out of Kenny Pickett in practice, and now here he is on the field and he looks like a different player. So I was curious to know if that's something that makes sense or not. I mean, I've never heard it before. Clearly you haven't either, but it will be interesting to see how the Steelers handle this quarterback situation. I know Steelers fans don't want to hear this, but Mason Rudolph has also been impressing there throughout camp. I'm just curious to see who they name the quarterback to come week 1, because Mason, I know there are some fans there in the building. We'll see what they end up doing, but it's a very fascinating situation the way he's handled things as well throughout camp, and what the Steelers ultimately do for their quarterback to come week 1. I think we're all expecting Mitch Trubisky to be the week 1 starter against the Bengals. I'm going to combine these next 3 quarterbacks together: Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell. What have you seen so far? The positives, the negatives, anything surprising to you?
I don't think anything that they did preseason week 1 was surprising. Truthfully, it's was all of them what we expected? For Ridder, he looked, poised in terms of his footwork, his fakes. He looked like an NFL quarterback. There didn't look like any transition period in how he operated a pocket, that sort of thing, the little things about playing the quarterback position. But that's to be expected for a 4-year starter. That's what he was billed at. And then he missed a good number of throws down the football field, which was also his biggest worry, was his accuracy and down the football field. So we kind of saw that from him. With Malik Willis, electric athlete. I mean, you didn't have to watch more than 4 plays of his tape on Liberty to know that. And so the fact that he's run away from NFL guys, it's yeah, we knew that. That's why some people were super high on him, is the guy can run. The guy is a cannon for an arm. And now he scrambled on 9 of his 21 dropbacks. He didn't throw a pass. That was the other thing. It was can he operate an NFL offense? Well, not right now is the problem. And Mike Vrabel pulls him because of it. And then with Sam Howell, some impressive downfield throws, the mobility that I think got undersold in the draft process you saw in his touchdown scramble. But then taking sacks, running into pressure, the pocket presence, and just the timing issues that probably were going to be a problem coming from North Carolina and an offense that didn't prepare him for the NFL whatsoever. So I think those guys were all kind of what we expected, and what we expect being probably not guys that you want starting right now. The latter 2, Willis and Howell, projects for the future. Ridder probably could start at some point during his rookie season, but you're not going to feel super great about that being the case.
I know you were a big fan of Sam Howell throughout the draft process. I'm just thinking of the situation in Washington and the way everyone has been talking about Carson Wentz. Do you see any scenario if Wentz struggles and we're up to, week 13, week 14, that they decide, let's just put Sam Howell on the field and see what he's got?
Oof, that one's tough because I could. It would probably be with the new staff or with Ron Rivera not being the head coach. It would be because he's gone and a new staff is there, and it's kind of or an interim head coach is there, and it's we got nothing to lose at this point. But if Ron Rivera is still fighting for his job, I think he's going to go tooth and nail with what he's got, with what gives him the best option there in Carson Wentz to try to eke out a few games and keep his job.
Yeah, because I do believe that as part of the trade to Washington, the same 75% stamp limit thing for the draft pick was involved here.
Oh, was
so
I forgot about that.
I believe it is.
First time. Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's once again involved for a pick coming up this year. I'm not mistaken. So I wonder if that does become a possibility there in Washington if there are struggles. Again, I do believe that Carson is a I guess, a better quarterback than what they had last year in Taylor Heineke. But regardless, I'm curious to see if that ever comes up this year, if they ever decide to go to him. I also feel like we'll be talking a lot about Aidan versus Travon Walker come this entire season, right? And we got to see both of them. Travon's actually played in 2 games. What have you seen so far in limited action out of both these guys?
Aidan he looks like he belongs. I would bet the house right now, dude stays healthy, he's going to be defensive rookie of the year. Like he was beating up Jake Matthews. He was beating up NFL ones, starting caliber guards and tackles, and just looked like the guy we saw at Michigan. So that was kind of why we had him as number 1. It's like, I feel good about that guy being a good football player right now. Travon Walker, though, was also impressive, and it's unfair to him that he's going to get compared to Aidan Hutchinson throughout the rest of his career, because he didn't ask for that. He was not a guy who was ever, if you asked last year, if you looked at both their tapes on the football field and voted for any awards, no one was going to say, yeah, Travon Walker was better at football than Aidan Hutchinson. It wasn't even close. So that comparison this year, like it doesn't exist. Travon Walker's not going to have the year that Aidan Hutchinson does if they both stay healthy. But it's more year 2, year 3, year 4 with Travon Walker. And truthfully, I was impressed with what I saw from him. Yeah, it's against backups for who he was playing against, but I don't think a tight end is going to be able to block Travon Walker in the run game. He's too long, too strong, too big. And that's what he got drilled in him at Georgia, was the run game. So he can be a difference maker in that regard. And obviously compared to like a K'Lavon Chaisson, just a much, much better player against the run. So I think he can be an impact run defender. One, I saw some, he had a inside move against Jedrick Wills that, showed some quickness. I think he can get by on like some stunts and some slants and use that size speed combo of his, but I just don't see a real impact pass rusher across from Josh Allen. Like I said, run game is where he's probably going to make his money right now.
You've been doing this for a long time. I got to ask you this. Travon Walker being the number 1 overall pick. Do you remember the last time we've had this type of situation where the number 1 overall pick is barely being talked about nationally?
Oof, that's a good, probably like Eric Fisher back 2013 was that.
Yeah.
Where no one really, everyone called that draft awful. And then, week 1, no one really who's going to discuss an offensive tackle on first take. No one's going to really do that. So I think that's probably the last time where it was really just like, oh yeah, he was first overall pick. Oh, okay. Like, who cares? That's probably one of the last time.
I feel like it's the least talked about number 1 overall pick probably since Eric Fisher. That's probably the latest one for sure. It just feels like we've barely been talking about him. Probably hear more about the Aidan versus Travon come this season, but we've barely heard about it. Let me go back to the lines for a second, because there's this 6th-round linebacker, Malcolm Rodriguez, or Rodrigo. This guy is the Hard Knock star right now in this last episode. A bit undersized at 5'11", but he appears to be a real player here. And I've had a few Oklahoma State people telling me they're not surprised one bit.
He's probably, and obviously his career remains to be played out, but as it stands right now, my biggest draft regret from this class in terms of where I ranked him, because I bought into the size concerns. 5'11", you said, only 5'11". There's not another 5'11" linebacker starting in the NFL right now. Like that's unprecedentedly small at a position where every running back, the running backs he's tackling are bigger than him. That's always a concern for a guy when projecting tape from college to the NFL. When you're that size, it's like it usually looks worse, and not just a little worse, like considerably worse because of the physicality difference. But that was the knock on him. That was like the only knock. Like him playing the game of football, there weren't a lot of knocks. He's a freak athlete at that size. He ran a 4.53 coming out, and they highlighted the clip on Hard Knocks. That's really what makes him so special. And that Kelvin Shepard said, we haven't had a linebacker make in the last 5 years. Is his ability to understand and see the game at a high level and play faster even than his time, because he shows in one gap, knows that that's going to force a running back to move, and then goes to the other gap before the running back even has a chance. That's high level, high IQ stuff that, as Kelvin Shepard said, like, I'm trying to teach you guys this stuff. You can't teach some of that stuff. You really can't teach that stuff that Malcolm Rodriguez does. So plays like that are the plays that if you see at the NFL level, that guy is going to be an impact player. So he's probably going to be starting in week 1. I mean, obviously not a lot of competition there, but I would put money on him starting week 1 right now.
He's been taking first team reps as of late. I know he did that yesterday in joint practices against the Colts, and it looks like Brad Holmes, their general manager, who has a draft background, came from the Rams, might have found another building block for this roster moving forward in Malcolm Rodriguez. You mentioned Kelvin Shepherd. The guy is full of energy. I mean, he is another one of those stars for this Hard Knocks episode, and he was using Malcolm as one of the examples as what he wants from the rest of the linebacker room there in Detroit. Let me quickly shift over to some running backs here, because Dameon Pierce in Houston, taken in the 4th round out of Florida, has 49 yards on 5 carries in the first preseason game, shows his vision, footwork, explosiveness, all of it. I'm looking at the Houston running back room. I think he's RB1 going into this year. Is that a crazy assessment here?
I would even say like he's RB1 getting in this year. Rex Burkhead, your competition there, has never been a full carry the load kind of guy, like do it all. Dameon Pierce is. I mean, he's 220. He picks up blitzes in pass pro. He was the best in blitz pickup of this entire draft class at the running back position. Like, I could not believe he fell the 4th round, and I couldn't believe he didn't get featured more at Florida, like only 100 carries last year. So he's still fresh. Like, this guy should be like the Texans' #1 running back. I don't even think that's a debate. He looked even a little bit more explosive than he did at Florida in that preseason game week 1, and his ability to cut, his ability to play through contact. Like, the only thing missing from him is maybe that second gear of, being able to run away from defenders. But that's such a rarity in the NFL that it's the other little things that matter so much more. So, yeah, I was a big fan of Dameon Pierce coming out, obviously, by the way I'm talking about him. You can probably tell. But I do think that what he put on tape preseason week 1 was more impressive than we saw from any other rookie running back across the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if people are tuning in to watch the Texans this year, but since GM Nick Casseri got there, it feels like he's finally brought in some normalcy into that building, and they're just trying to find some pieces for this team. They are big believers in Davis Mills. I think you can make an argument he was probably the 2nd best rookie quarterback last year. I am curious to see how they do this year, but it definitely sounds like Dameon Pierce is going to be a player who will have a big role come this year. We actually have Ian Harditz here on the podcast next week for fantasy. Curious to hear what he has to say about Dameon Pierce as a potential fantasy pickup come this year. One more running back I want to mention. This is a 7th round pick. The Chiefs appear to be very high on Isaiah Pacheco, a 7th round pick out of Rutgers. He's out here wearing Tyreek Hill's number 10. And again, it seems like there's a lot of excitement there. I mean, what should we know about him and what he could do in this Andy Reid offense?
So he's the guy that I need to see more in preseason. Like, I'm very curious to see more in preseason because the speed and size is there. Like, he ran mid 4.3s at 216 pounds. I think he had the best speed score of any running back in the draft and had natural hands coming out of Rutgers. Didn't get featured a ton, but looked like he could be a receiver, which is obviously something Andy Reid covets out of running backs. Why he ends up in Kansas City instead of, probably being a UDFA, where a lot of draft analysts I know probably had him graded, because why we had him as a UDFA is because at 216 pounds, he doesn't run up to that weight. He did not break a lot of tackles, had one of the lowest, I think he had the lowest broken tackle rate of any drafted running back. And that's a thing that you don't see in practice. You can see his reads, you see his hands, you see his speed, you see all that in practice. But then when it comes to, lower shoulder contact, defensive backs backing up, you're not taking that hit. You're not delivering that blow as a running back. So that's what I need to see from him. First preseason game, what do you have? 3 carries. You really didn't get a handle on it. Didn't do much with them. So that's what I'm going to need to see to really buy in to this hype. But that's why you take chances on athletes, man. And that's why 7th round, you might as well, when a guy runs a 4.3 at that size, because the payoff of what he could be, and especially coming from an offense at Rutgers where you're not going to look your best. We've already seen that with Gus Edwards coming out of there. You're not going to be featured a ton and look great. So, yeah, I do think that Pacheco, I'm excited, but I want to see more actual game footage from him.
All right, so you mentioned you want to see a little bit more of him. Who are some of these other guys, rookies, you're keeping an eye out here for week 2 and 3 of the preseason?
I'm really looking, PFF analyst, offensive line. Yeah, that's what we do best here, that not a lot of other people do around the NFL. But that duo in Seattle, I mean, Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross, what they looked like in week 1 of the preseason. And yes, it was the Steelers backups, got to couch it with that, but they looked like they belonged. And they're both fell kind of in the draft because they came from offenses that were about as not NFL ready as you can get. Air raid offense, both played under Mike Leach, which is not asking you to run block. You're not doing double teams in the run game. You're not doing a lot of things that you're asked to do. But then on tape, week 1, they look like they could do it. Like I was very excited. And the last time, a team actually found 2 starting offensive tackles in one draft, I can't remember. Dating back, I think 2000, the Green Bay Packers found Tauscher and Clifton. Like it's been a while. It doesn't happen, and everyone's paying top dollar to find just competency. These guys look like they could be special. So that's the group I'm looking for, because Seahawks obviously not going to factor much in the playoff conversation, but it's been a while since they had a good draft, and this looks like they had a good draft.
I was going to ask you about Seattle, because there's a scenario where they could have 5 starting rookies this year. You mentioned the 2 offensive tackles, the 2 cornerbacks, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, a running back in Kenneth Walker, likely will split carries with Rashad Penny. Boye Mafe will probably have a rotational role. It's been a while since they've had a good, decent draft. I mean, overall, what do you think of that entire draft? And now that we're hearing about these guys in OTAs and camp and now the preseason, it feels like there's a lot of excitement there.
Yeah, what was it? 2015 was the last time they actually had more than one good player. It was like Frank Clark and Tyler Lockett, and obviously the whole dynasty was built in 3 years from 2010 to 2012. So John Schneider can draft. He's shown he's capable. I was a massive fan of their draft at the time. I mean, Charles Cross was our OT1. We had Abraham Lucas as a top 50 player, falls all the way to the 3rd round. So going to be high on what the haul they got. And then Boye Mafe, I mean, the explosiveness off the edge. They've been drafting all these bad athletes at defensive end, whether it's LJ Collier, whether it was Darrell Taylor at defensive end. They've been drafting guys that don't necessarily fit the profile of the guys winning at the NFL level consistently. Well, Boye Mafe does. Freak athlete. So very excited to see what this draft class does, because, my Lord, they need it. I mean, they were so depleted of talent probably heading into the season. Very nice to see for Seahawks fans.
All right, last one here, and maybe your answer will be Seattle, but we've had, as I said, OTAs, some camp, a preseason game, a million press conferences, and some more time to think about everything since April. The team that will get the most out of their rookie class in 2022 will be who?
I do think the Lions, just because I feel like Aidan Hutchinson is going to be the most impactful defensive player, probably most impactful rookie. So that might be cheating to say. And then obviously getting Malcolm Rodriguez and his contributions already, that's a pretty good start. But I also think the Kansas City Chiefs, they were a team that I thought the Chargers had before the draft. I thought the Chargers were the favorite in that division. I would have put money on the Chargers to win that. After their draft, I think it's the Chiefs. I mean, what we've already seen from Sky Moore, what we've already seen from George Karlaftis, what we've already seen from Trent McDuffie, those guys are not only just starting for you as rookies, 3 stars as rookies. They could be impact, actual quality stars for you as rookies. So I'll lean to the Kansas City Chiefs there if I'm going to answer one.
It's actually amazing we went through this entire episode without bringing up any of their rookies, because some of those guys really impressed in that first preseason game, especially Karlaftis, who I know a lot of people did not like that pick. I don't know if you've seen this video. There's a really funny video from draft night of Chiefs fans reacting to that pick, where Roger Goodell says George, and they wanted George Pickens, and everybody jumps up like crazy, and then they realize it's Karlaftis, and they're all just really upset. But it looks like he's off to a great start as well. Trent McDuffie, a cornerback. Sky Moore, I know you're super high on him. I know they're very excited about him as well. So we'll see how the Chiefs do. That entire division, honestly, is just stacked. Every AFC West game this year will be absolutely bonkers. All right, Mike, I want to thank you for coming on. Everyone can follow you on Twitter. It is at PFF_Mike. Check out all your great work at PFF.com. And of course, the new podcast, which debuts next Thursday, wherever you get your podcast. I'm really excited about it. And we'll definitely do this again during the season, have another rookie check-in with you. So, Mike, thanks for coming on. I'm looking forward to the season officially starting in a few weeks.
For sure, Ari. Appreciate the love, man. Thanks for everything you do.